This is the Coming Home Podcast with John Allen. And welcome everybody to this episode of Coming Home with John Allen. I am your host, John Allen, and today I have with me Deborah Jeanne Weitzman. She is, to say it very briefly, I want to describe you as a performer, a writer, a teacher, and a truth seeker. I love it. Now, those four titles are going to give us so much to talk about. But above and beyond those descriptive words, it just seems to me that you're living quite the exciting life. You are a performer. You're a coach of sorts. You're a teacher. Wow.
And I really do love to dance all the Latin dances.
And you like to dance as well.
Yeah, so hopefully tonight it's going to stop raining so we can dance outside of the Oslo Opera House, which is my favorite thing to do in Oslo.
You live in Oslo from time to time. You travel quite a bit.
I travel quite a bit.
But when you're in Norway, Oslo.
Especially this summer. I like to come back for the summer.
So you spend roughly half of the year here in Norway?
No.
Not even half the year?
Well, let's keep it that.
Yeah, roughly 50-50.
Yeah, let's keep it like that.
Now, how did you get to, because I have to say this, there are a lot of musicians, but there are very few working/touring musicians. That's a different thing.
And I don't do it as much as I used to. Those were can I say my age? Because I'm happy to be alive this long.
Yeah.
I turned 70. So I've begun my golden years.
We love it.
So in my, before my golden years, I toured a lot.
Yeah.
Through the 90s, 2000s, pretty much a lot until COVID really took that out. And I played some this last year, but it's not as much as before. And maybe that will come back, but so far it hasn't. Do
you want it to come back, or are you comfortable with a more slowed down, relaxed musical life?
Well, I'm writing a memoir that it sort of features Leonard Cohen, so I've been reading a lot about him. And I have to confess that I'm jealous. So therefore,
how so?
Well, because he kept going. He
sure did.
And so they say that if you are jealous about something, that means a part of you wants it.
That's very true.
So maybe that's my answer. That perhaps I still want it. But I want it in a good way.
But when it's jealousy without malice, isn't that inspiration rather than jealousy?
Perhaps.
You're inspired by
perhaps.
It's a nicer word, inspired.
So to answer your question, I fell out of the loop that unless I'm in a place, like for example, I'll probably be in Sardinia this fall, and I was already invited to do a kind of house concert, and and I was in France in the spring, and we did a spontaneous concert. I play with my husband now; he plays the flute.
Okay.
Sorry.
Now, I love my wife to death. All of my viewers and listeners know that. But the one thing missing is she's not musical in the slightest bit. So I always tell her that she better hope that they don't figure out how to make a time machine, because I will go back to 1974, 75, and I will find Joni Mitchell. I will seduce her, and that will be my new lady. Sorry, Snoopy, you can't sing or dance? That's a big hole in... No, I do tell her that. But I only tell her that after she told me that if she and I were eating a romantic dinner at a restaurant, and if Tom Cruise was there and went like that to her to come over to him, she would go. So I had to get her back this hour.
Both of you have a little hook.
We keep each other in line with that threat there, So... you mentioned Leonard Cohen. Who else are you inspired by?
Well, Joni Mitchell for sure.
Isn't she just...
When I think I was 14, when a cousin of mine from Canada gave me a present of, I guess the first, I can't remember the name now, but the first Joni Mitchell. And I was 15, 16, I was just playing every tuning with her, singing everything with her. That when I started singing myself and touring, well, not even touring so much, but in New York City when I was doing the clubs in Greenwich Village, the managers used to tell me, you got to go cold turkey with Joni Mitchell.
Really?
You're too much like her.
Really? Yeah.
Too much like her.
Well, it's interesting how
Find
trends.
your own voice.
Well, it's interesting how trends come and go. One thing I noticed, I came to Norway in 2002, and it seemed like in those years, say from 2002 up until maybe 2008 or 9, there was a wash of Norwegian ladies, female singers who sat with the acoustic guitar and sang the soft songs. And to me, they were trying to do a Joni imitation. And I don't think, again, back to that word inspired by, that's a great thing. But to copy is a little bit
I didn't try
boring.
to copy, but she was so inspiring and she was so prolific and so inventive.
Yeah, well, and I guess what I'm saying, I'm not saying you were trying to copy. I didn't hear you back then, but I think it's very opinionated, because while I say some of these Norwegian female singer-songwriters were trying to copy Joni Mitchell, my fellow Norwegian musician friends will debate me to the ends of the earth that I'm wrong. So it's very much an opinion.
I had a lot of students who sang The River and Blue.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
a lot.
Okay.
Yeah. So who knows? Who knows?
Those are maybe the two.
I mean, I would work with them to try to have them find their voice rather than mimic her. So I was definitely of the campaign to not be that. But
Now, you mentioned your students. Let's talk about your teaching here. Now, how do you instruct a vocalist? Now, I know how you can instruct a guitarist or a pianist, an instrumentalist. That's kind of straightforward. There is a skill, a physical,
you have to
technical
put their
skill.
fingers in a
Put your
position.
fingers here or there, or breathe this way or that way into the woodwind instrument. But how do you teach a vocalist?
Well, now I'm going to have to backtrack before I
Okay,
answer
let's
you.
backtrack.
So this Alexander technique, which when we first spoke,
Yes.
you vaguely heard of. Anyway, so I was a young singer, and I was very nervous and very shy, and I wanted so much to be there with my songs.
Yeah.
And the first paying group I was in, we were in our early 20s. We were 3 women. We called ourselves Jamboree, and I was the main songwriter, and I was writing, kind of funky, girly, cheesy songs of
Now, what year was this roughly?
in the early 70s.
Okay.
Yeah, but then I would lose my voice so fast. And I was sure that I had something really wrong with me. I was actually sure that I had throat cancer
Really?
because it hurt always so much. And so when I discovered the Alexander technique, which actually was a bit later, it was amazing because, in fact, when I went to the doctor and the doctor said, say, look down my throat, nothing was wrong. How could there be nothing wrong when there was something wrong?
Right.
So the Alexander works with that thing of tension when you don't want tension. What that thing was just a wall of tension, partly to protect me.
So now we're talking psychological.
Well, also physical. When I was trying to sing in tune, which a lot of singers had this problem. You're trying so hard to get it right that you end up getting it really wrong because you are
Anxiety.
You're over trying.
Yeah.
So the Alexander technique works very much in undoing that
Okay.
and helping that energetic flow, which is all your love and your desire and your inspiration, not your terror and fear and, oh no, I will get shamed.
Yeah.
That's the holding back energy. And that energy gets so habitual that you don't even know you're doing it.
Right. Subconscious.
Yeah. So when I studied Alexander and then later became a teacher of it, it helped me enormously. So, for example, the first concerts, I was now living in San Francisco, and I had a grant, very interesting job where I would go around to housebound people of many ages, all kinds of races, all kinds of colors, and I would write songs about their life.
How interesting.
So they would tell me their story. We would find some poetry for it. I would begin with my guitar to find melody for it. And when they were happy, like you could see their body and their eyes.
That sounds like an excellent exercise in creativity.
It was a very nice, it was a job from the Arts Council was great. Anyway, so I had this job and so I had it. Then there was a big video film of these songs and I had to sing and I was studying Alexander then and I was terrified. And my teacher said, just think about your back. Just think about your back. Because everybody knows, you heard this word diaphragm.
Yeah.
But the diaphragm actually goes into your back.
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you think into your back, you're not only you're correcting the wrong use of pushing it forward.
Yeah.
But you're opening into like this amazing amount of territory of space.
Right.
Of resonance.
A lot of people, the resonance. A lot of people, when they think of voice or a vocal performance, they're thinking throat and mouth.
Right. And we have a
What
whole
about the
body.
rest of you? Yeah.
So
what
you
about
asked,
the rest of you?
what do I do with the lessons?
Yeah.
So I would start the lesson with some of the Alexander works. Some I would do it on the table. It actually feels really nice. And then into standing, into warming up. And sometimes with my hands, I would be at the piano and then I would sometimes with my hands just give soft coaching to get that energy flowing. And then into song, and so a lot of these singers would, and I worked with a lot of advanced singers who already knew how to sing in a way.
Yeah.
But they were maybe limiting the potential.
That's a very interesting thing. I think that take somebody like Whitney Houston or Luther Vandross. These wonderful, very resonant vocalists.
Yeah, but they didn't need singing lessons. They're amazing.
Sure. And my point is I'm sure they started amazing, but isn't there always room for improvement? Now, I don't know if they ever used a vocal coach or anything, but I'm sure there was a process of, in air quotes, quoting oneself even with vocalists. Coaching oneself, even with vocalists like Luther Vandross or Whitney Houston or even Pavarotti. You're coaching yourself. You're evaluating yourself, and you're finding out where how you can squeeze a little bit more out of that voice.
Well, so just because I saw the movie about Whitney Houston a few days ago.
Okay.
I can answer that question.
Fresh in your mind.
Her mother was her teacher at the beginning.
That's true.
Her mother.
That's true.
Her mother really coached her.
That's true.
And later, when she started getting in trouble, her manager, it was a really heartbreaking scene when her manager was really like begging her to stop smoking, get off the drugs, take care of herself. Yeah. It would have been probably a good idea if she didn't have such an amazing natural voice. Like somebody like myself, I was not born with an amazing natural voice.
Okay.
So I had to work with it and all kinds of steps to be healthy, alcohol use and sleep and food and eating cheese or peanuts or chocolate. I had to pay attention to everything. Maybe she was, like, shall we say, so lucky that she had such a natural voice, but didn't really take as good care of it at the end because it was such a natural voice. Who knows?
You mentioned a few food items. You mentioned cheese. Dairy products ruin my voice. My singing voice, of course, but even to speak, I'll find myself having to, clear my throat.
It makes the mucus.
Yeah, and it's just, it's very interesting, the connection. Singing is not just singing. There's so much physicality, even there's so much mentality, there's so much emotion.
Absolutely.
And all of these things are connected. So the method that you use to teach just puts one in touch with all of those different aspects, the physical, the mental.
I think of it as the sport of singing.
Very good. Yeah.
So I really would get all my students walking to get the breath going. Some of the breathing exercises we would do to do
it's very physical.
Walking, and also, it doesn't mean like fast walking or running. That's different. Then you're getting out of breath, and that's a whole other story. Walking, that it's almost like mindful walking.
Well, I was going to say, it puts you in touch with some kind of mental, quasi-spiritual thing, which again influences your singing voice.
Absolutely.
Or your access to your singing voice. Yeah. Am I right?
And with the Alexander work, partly understanding the actual physics of how the voice works. And I mean, I took regular singing lessons before, and one time a teacher that was really expensive when I was a really poor student in New York, he basically told me I was a hopeless case. And I almost like was wanting to jump off a bridge. I felt that desperate. And later, many years later, ironically, he married an Alexander teacher. And I saw him at some kind of concert, and I was terrified. And one of the other Alexander teachers said, go and remind him what he told you in the 70s. This was I think in the early 2000s. And he apologized to me. He said, I'm so sorry.
Good for him.
I didn't know what to do with a student like you who was so nervous.
I wonder how many dreams are crushed because of that one person in a powerful position as a guidance counselor of sorts or a teacher of sorts, and they just...
I mean, sometimes people really were so vulnerable, crying their eyes out. And I mean, I am basically a kind, shy person, so I had that empathy. But I definitely had my own experience of being, shall we say, crucified. So I knew how vulnerable a young student could be, and I was super careful to work with them when the voice wasn't working yet. Yet.
Well, there's your talent as a teacher. You know there's something there, and you find the way to draw it out, or to, if not draw it out, make the student aware that there is, in fact, something to draw out and develop.
Yeah, I mean,
that's an art form.
I work with people who are hopelessly out of tune. You know, the people who are told to, shall we say, hold the sword and not speak. And a lot of those people are really like traumatized. And you know, I work with those people, and I'm kind of honest. And I said, I'm going to work with you. Your pitch will get better. Your voice will get better. Maybe nobody will pay you to sing, but you can sing. So I really try to help make that differentiation, you know, and I don't want to discourage somebody. I don't say for sure.
No.
But, you know, don't count on it. But I'm not so mean, like, you know, what, like on The Voice or...
Yeah, a good teacher has to understand the power that they have, and their words
like when Simon
can hurt.
says, don't quit your day job.
Yeah,
I mean, you see
their
the
words,
people burst into tears.
Their words can hurt, or their words can heal and help, you know. But how do we... Because we're lucky to do these things, to perform. You know, I do stand-up comedy. I do public speaking on TV and radio. And I'm also a musician, and I am so aware of how fortunate I am to be able to do that. It's humbling. Yeah. And there's also something strange about it, because you've said a couple of times that you're also very shy. And so am I. How do we do these things when we are so shy? What is that? That's a little strange, isn't it?
We become someone else. We become the persona.
Okay. Yeah.
Because the shyness, I think, is our protection. It's like we have some treasures inside. I don't know about you, but my parents were not so eager to see my treasures inside. So I learned at a young age to sort of protect them.
Okay.
And hide them.
Yeah.
So often when I have a student that seems to be very shy, I kind of know. I mean, they wouldn't come for a singing lesson if there's not some desire in there.
I think a lot of young musicians are shy, or they have less belief in themselves because of, if not the lack of parental support, sometimes the outright discouragement that they get from their parents.
Yeah, you did.
I was a music teacher. I was a music teacher for a while, and it was a little sad how many of them said that they got zero support, or they were in fact sometimes discouraged to pursue music. Again, it's those words from people who are in positions of power. Those words can hurt, or they can heal and help.
Well, I was very surprised over the years. Again, this is before COVID. I haven't started teaching again in Ireland since it may come back. I'm starting to teach workshops again outside. But anyway, so when I was teaching in Ireland for like 10 years, and you know, growing up in New York, you always imagine everyone in Ireland sings great, right?
Yeah.
Because they just have it in their culture. And
For me, I hear the speaking voice, and I start thinking, well,
and
of course
know,
I can
it's
sing.
such a
Such a beautiful tone.
accent, and,
Yeah,
you know, they're
such a beautiful
just,
tone.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I was very surprised when a lot of people came to my workshops, and I would work with them, and you know, they would. I do it in a very not shaming way, but in front of the group, where I work with somebody where they're singing in front of the group,
Yeah.
and we really come into that stuff. You know, the terror, let's call it.
Yeah.
And I work with them, and you know, it's like the baptism of fire. We're going to get through it. And so many would tell the story of the nun that would shame them and tell them to shut up. And I was like,
yeah.
really?
I tell you that I think that stops a lot of potentially successful musicians from even getting started. Yeah. Stuff like that. That hurts.
Yeah, my first published book called Pandora Learns to Sing, which is some of my journey through my own fear, partly with Alexander technique, therapy, and stuff.
Let me, before I forget, I should have done this at the beginning. You're mentioning these books that you've written. You can get these things at her website, DeborahJeanne.com, and you will see the writing. I will write it in the description of this episode, which you can see on YouTube or in the descriptions on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. I will put her website in there.
Or you can get my music, and I have another book coming out in the spring. But anyway, the book that is already out, Pandora Learns to Sing. Oh no, I forgot.
I'm such a terrible host. I interrupted you.
It's okay. It's okay. That's my 70 years little senior moment, you know, of just. Well, you know, in any case, coming from a place of fear into a place of love.
Yes.
Where my fear of standing in front of people, thinking they're going to shoot me, into being so in love with the music coming through me, I just can't help but share it.
Yeah.
And that's the difference.
Yeah.
That's really a big difference.
Where do you get the most joy in this thing called music? Where do you get the most joy? The writing process, the recording process, or the live performance?
That's a very tricky question, because in a way, through all of them at certain moments.
Sure.
I mean, when a song comes to me, it's like I don't know if you get this. It's like a telegram.
I do, yeah.
Wow.
Yes.
That is, for me, one of the best. Lately, I haven't been getting those telegrams, and I'm really, hello, higher powers out there.
Well,
Can
that
you
inspiration
send me a
thing,
telegram?
sometimes when it hits me, and just imagine having goosebumps, the chills, you know, for a couple of hours as you're writing it and developing the song, you know.
So, you know, when that hits, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
I recently wrote a musical, and when some of the songs came...
What's the name of the musical?
Island in the Storm. It's about climate change. And there's some of that on the website as well.
And that album is available on Spotify as well, is it not?
Yeah.
There you go. Yep.
That album is called Briefly Mine.
Briefly Mine.
Because it's a mixture. It's some songs and some songs of the musical.
I see. Okay.
I don't have an album yet for the musical because it's still in development. I mean, it's finished, but it, you know, so that's going to come. I want
to talk to you later about that because we talked a little bit on the telephone about a digital release versus album or CD.
Yeah,
we're going to get into it because that is a.
So in any case, when a song comes, that is for me.
Isn't that nice?
I mean, I've always felt this kind of longing for home. Where do I belong? When the song is gushing through me, that's where I belong. So it's a great feeling of belonging. It's a great feeling of like arrival. I'm home. This is who I am. I don't care if I'm famous or not famous, poor or not.
Doesn't
I forget
matter where
about
you're
being
living
hungry.
at the moment.
I just forget everything.
Yeah.
So that's that. I have done a lot of recordings, and some moments are really magical. Mm-hmm. I made a recording in the Netherlands where we did a lot of it live, and we had some really great moments.
Yeah,
where everything kind of clicked. Yeah. And I mean, there was this beautiful Italian musician who was living in the Netherlands, and he played everything, and he took out this bamboo flute, and he just like blew us all away. Yeah. And then, you know, as we're recording, it's just like everybody's being hypnotized. So, and then when you do a great concert, I had a couple of really great concerts at a place in Berlin called the Passionskerche, which is like playing actually in heaven. Yeah. It's an old church turned into a concert hall, and they just do a great sound check, and you Anything that it
yeah.
just all of it just resonates in these old walls, and that's fantastic to play.
Those live moments, of course, I love being part of that. And I'm not part of that so much anymore. It's been a while since I played live, and I do all my recording solo. But when I see a lot, I love watching live music on video or television if it comes on television. And I love those moments where, and you can see it if you're tuned into the performance and you're watching, you can see when those musicians surprise one another or super impress one another. It's a look, it's a nod, it's a little gesture, and the chills come because I know I
have a few on my website of some live videos from shows.
Yeah.
But there was one of the last groups I played with, besides these musicians I mentioned with recording with Lasse.
Lasse Hafreger.
Yeah.
Hello, Lasse.
So I had this really interesting group in Berlin, and there was a saxophone player and a violinist. And when we were really on, it was beautiful.
Yeah.
But time to time, the violinist would be flirting with somebody in the audience, and we were like, "Hello."
How does a violinist flirt with somebody in the audience? How does that work?
He just takes endless solos, and he never comes back to join the song.
I see. Okay.
I mean, we had to make it into a funny moment, like, "Hello, the train of this song is soon leaving on platform 2.
I love it.
Are you with us?"
No, those musical moments, and again, like I say, I've for most of the music that I've done it alone.
Yeah.
And I miss that live thing with the band. I miss that connection. It's different.
It's magical.
It's a different level in life.
Yeah, because I wish I had more courage to be a solo artist. That's when my shyness kicks in. So when
just you, the acoustic guitar, and a microphone?
Yeah. I can get a bit spooked by that. So when I'm with the other musicians,
you're quite alone.
I really
quite
love
exposed.
the idea of that it's not only me.
Yeah.
I really that works really well for me.
I like to compare. I compare stand-up comedy with music. When I'm doing stand-up comedy, I am so exposed. It's just me. It's me and the microphone, and if I'm not doing something between me and the microphone and it's not hitting right, you see it on all of those faces out there. But in a live music situation with a band, I can flub a note or two or forget a lyric or two. But if these other people with me on the stage are doing their thing, it can mask it.
Right.
And there's and I would imagine, because I have actually never performed solo music on stage. I record everything solo, but when I'm on stage, I have a band with me. I have never performed solo on stage, and I don't think I could do it because I think that would be even more exposing than doing stand-up comedy.
It's pretty exposing, and that's why you have to kind of, I've gotten better over the years to, the more you're in the song. I mean, I'll go back to this Leonard Cohen, who I've been doing a lot of research. He learned how to hypnotize when he was 9 years old, and he kind of like hypnotizes the whole scene. And I'm not saying that I'm good at that, but it's almost like the scared part of me, I hypnotize. So she's sort of lost in, and sometimes I even think of it, forgive me if this is feeling a little bit super or too much woo-woo, but I really imagine like an angel or somebody who sings really well behind me.
Okay,
just borrowing my body.
But that's not strange at all.
Okay. Because that really works for me really well. That it's not just me,
When I'm performing music live, or even when I'm recording alone in the studio, of course I have my own skill set, love it or hate it, respect it or not. I have my skill set, but I'll tap into my inner Prince, or you know, that inner Luther Vandross or that inner Joni Mitchell. They're there. I'm pulling that inspiration. So you know, people can say, oh well, that's just a bunch of new age mumbo jumbo.
But I think those guys did that too.
Absolutely, they had their heroes. That
they became
Absolutely.
larger than life.
Whitney Houston had her mother and her auntie, Dionne Warwick,
and the spirits.
And exactly.
I mean, when you see and you hear some of the times when she's saying, you know, exquisite. I mean,
that's the ancestors right there.
Spirit is
that is the ancestors. Absolutely, yeah. So it's one thing I would like to touch on. You mentioned a longing for home.
Mm. And no, and this is your name of your podcast, right?
Coming Home with John Allen. Coming Home with John Allen. JohnAllenPod.com. JohnAllenPod.com. I have to say that.
I mean, when I was like getting myself, you know, where I'm going, because it all happened so quickly that I'm here. I thought, whoa, coming home. Yeah. That's like my whole theme of my whole life. I'm always trying to come home.
It fits. See?
Yeah.
But this longing for home. Do you sometimes? Well, let me ask you first. Where in New York are you born?
Well, I was born in New York City. I was actually born in Brooklyn.
Brooklyn, okay.
Yeah.
Do you feel sometimes? I've been here in Norway for 22 years, and I am very much suffering from homesickness. But it kind of doubles the frustration because I also feel at the same time that I'm homesick for something that doesn't exist anymore.
Bingo.
My memories have been frozen in time.
Absolutely.
But time itself is not frozen. Things change. People change. Yeah. Circumstances change. So what am I homesick for? Do you see what I mean?
Absolutely. I'm 100%.
Can you identify with that? Yeah.
My whole body's buzzing right now, John. Really
there we go.
buzzing.
We buzz on Coming Home with John Allen.
Yeah, we buzz. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, I was not long away from where I grew up, where that whole area changed, and then it changed again, and then it changed again. And I was recently there when my father passed away. He's buried in the cemetery in this town. It's called Laurelton in Queens. And we showed my husband the street I grew up, and it became such a dangerous neighborhood that everything is fenced and gated, and it doesn't look at all like, you know, when I was growing up, okay, we were not wealthy or anything, but it was just perhaps a simpler time, and not so. Anyway, that area just.
I think cities change a lot more.
That is not a happy area. It seems that everybody is afraid.
And I think big cities change more and quicker than rural areas do. Now, I'm from a rural area in Ohio, and physically it hasn't changed a bit. It looks the same.
So you can go home in a way. Or at least the
thing I was getting to is it's the people who have changed. There are some people with whom I went to school who now are people that I don't want to sound elitist. I don't want to sound exclusionary, but good Lord, some of these people, it would be very difficult for me to spend 5 minutes with them.
Yeah, sometimes I think of like, would I want to sit next to that person on a Greyhound bus?
Exactly.
Nope.
Exactly. And that's a little sad. I mean, that's reality, and we can't be so naive as to think that time has frozen. Yeah. Like I said, our memories have frozen, but time goes on, which means that people change and circumstances change.
And you are here in Norway, and I'm here in Norway, and I don't know your whole journey of how you got to Norway, but I
that
certainly...
woman who picked you up from the train, it's all her fault.
She brought you here. Well, my story is a bit different, and just each of the places I lived in...
Yeah.
You know, they change you.
They do.
I mean, one book, I haven't written it yet, but I have notes for it. It's called Cultural Confusion, because that's the other side. I've lived in so many places. Like one land, you know, it's good if you burp. Another land, it's not good if you burp. Yeah. You know, here in Norway, if you're too confronting, people really don't like it. In Netherlands, if you don't ask people, hey, what's going on? They don't like it. So every land you have to learn.
Norway has its nuances. It's
every place does.
Norway is very Americanized,
and yet
it's still Norway. But it's still Norway. Right. So there are those cultural differences there, and I haven't come across any cultural norm in Norway that I have not been able to either embrace or deal with without breaking a sweat. But there are things in Norway that one must be aware of if you're going to be
I mean, one thing
socially
I really had to learn,
successful.
besides all the other things, taking your shoes off and so on. But, when people are depressed here, when I grew up in New York, we would like reach out, are you okay?
Yes.
Can I come have a cup of tea with me? Here, like, they hate that. They want to be left alone.
Yeah.
And that's still something that's like, really,
Well, but then also within the Norwegian culture, there are many subcultures because Snoopy and I call my wife Snoopy. You got her
figured
name. I call her Snoopy. How is your Norwegian? Do you know?
And jeg snakker ikke norsk, og jeg ikke snakker norsk. I still don't know which is right.
Well, have you heard the term snoopa? Like if they say, hi, snoopa, that means like, hi, sweetheart, or hi, baby doll, or whatever. So my friend, when I was living in the Chicago area, my Norwegian friend, this lady who my wife was longtime friends with, had my wife come over to visit her. And when my wife walked into the gym where we were training, and the other friend shouts out, yeah, hi, snoopa. And I know she didn't say Snoopy, but just to be silly, when my wife walked up and I shook her hand, I said, hi, Snoopy, nice to meet you, I'm John. So she's been Snoopy ever since for 25 years. That's where that came from. No, but so the language thing, that's what I was getting at. The language thing introduces several subsets of the Norwegian culture just because of the language or the region. Up north, they have a little bit different approach to that whole thing with depression or showing care for someone who needs it than they do down here.
I was surprised when I toured in the north. I actually still have friends from Hammerfest.
We're from right around the corner. Our place is right around the corner on Seiland, the next island, like around going back towards Alta from Hammerfest.
It was amazing how friendly the people were in the north.
It's different.
I mean, I can almost tell when I meet somebody just in passing, oh, you're from the north. How did you know? They're just more gregarious, a little bit wild in their thinking.
Yes, absolutely.
Like, for example, I was booked to play a whole week in a town called Kirkenes up in the very north.
Up in Finnmark,
and it was crazy cold. I mean, I did see the Northern Lights, which was amazing. Yeah. And I was even able to see it from my room, so I could have the blanket over me because it was really cold. But the people would, like, make a joke. Yeah. And I wasn't sleeping with any of them. I mean, I just, would do, it was three 45-minute sets. And, and then I would get home and it was colder than I'd ever experienced. So I wasn't sleeping with anyone, but they would ask me every night, are you pregnant yet? Are you pregnant yet? And I picked up on it, and just to get them to enjoy me, and everybody started coming, and it got more and more crowded every day because I made a thing like, oh, I'm going to check to see, and they would tell their friends, she might be pregnant today. We have to go. It's like this mystery is Deborah going to get pregnant? So, I mean, that was their humor.
They have a totally different sense of humor up there. They are more friendly and open. If it was up to me, we would still we still have our home up there, but we, of course, as you see, we live here. But if it was up to me, we would still be
there's a lot of snow and ice. You didn't mind that?
It's okay. I'm from Ohio.
Oh, yeah, you have a lot of snow and ice. I lived in Michigan in Ann Arbor. It was a lot of snow and ice, yeah. Well, I'm not such a big snow and ice fan.
Yeah, no, that doesn't bother me at all. And in fact, up there in the middle of winter, with total darkness for all those months, but it's not totally dark because you have the northern lights. And where we were along the coast and those islands and stuff, you have the Alpine mountains with all that snow and a full moon. That is not darkness. So I don't know. I guess I'm lucky. I found the way to enjoy everything up there. But talking about depression, there are serious problems up there when it gets dark like that. Even people who are there as Norwegians who have always lived there have problems with that. But I think because that is such a normal thing up there, people have developed their ways of showing care and giving each other attention and things like that. And it's something that you don't see down south here. You just don't. So.
I do. I mean, I'm always sort of helping people if they're
there's beautiful people. Yeah, don't get me, there are beautiful people here, but it's not as normalized.
No, because sometimes when I help somebody, they'll look at me like, what
Yes,
are you doing?
yes, yeah.
Don't interfere with don't cross my boundaries.
I remember once, about a year ago, at the grocery store, there was a lady in front of me who tried to pay for her groceries, and something was wrong with her card. I think it was only like a couple hundred kroner, maybe $25, $30 worth of stuff. And I said, I'll pay for that, no problem. Let me do that. And she got so angry with me, and I had to backtrack and say and explain, I'm not trying to say you're poor. I know you can pay for this, but I see something's wrong with your card. I can do. And the cussing out that she gave me, it was, and I didn't get mad. I got upset that somebody could be that reluctant to accept a little bit of humanity.
Well, that was one of the first things when I was, back to my giving lessons. When the first years I was living in Norway, I was doing a lot of concerts, and I was playing a lot of Smuget, and I was...
Smuget.
I played that. Yeah, I was a regular there at the beginning years.
I want to talk to you about that.
Yeah, and then, I was giving lessons at home, and a couple of students that came very regularly, I called them my cultural attachés, so I could ask for some advice.
Yeah.
And one very gloomy November day, I asked the neighbor downstairs to borrow eggs, and she looked like I was asking her, could I kill her child? It was so severe, and I was.
You get met with that.
And then I asked my
down
student,
here.
and she said, you asked your. Oh no, you shouldn't do that. I said, why?
Yeah.
And she said, because it shows that I can't run my household.
Yeah, exactly.
That the farms, especially in this eastern part of Norway, were so spread out that if you couldn't.
Yeah.
If you ran out of eggs, that was a very bad
That's kind of
sign.
like how that lady at the grocery store thought I was showing that she was poor, Smuget, though. So what years were you playing down there? I
came here
that
in
place.
1997, so
Yeah.
it was like 97, 98, 99.
I played there. This was when I was a lot more active with playing live with my band. I miss those guys. But this, I'd say, was maybe in 2004. I had heard about Smuget back in the States.
Really?
Prince used to do after shows there. If he played somewhere in Scandinavia, he would go there. Eric Clapton played there. Buddy Guy had. So I heard about this place in Norway. And then all of a sudden, I was in a position where I could. So Snoopy booked me in my band there. They called it the showcase evening.
Yeah, the showcases, right?
Is that what you were?
Yeah, a lot of showcases.
So this was in 2004, maybe 2005. And I was so proud and so happy. Oh my gosh, this is Smuget. Prince was on this stage, Eric Clapton, And we were playing, this is maybe the second song in our set. It was this kind of funky rock funk thing. And there's a little breakdown, and where it was kind of instrumental, not a solo or anything, but just an instrumental breakdown. And I say out to the crowd out there, y'all can dance if you want to. And they all just stood there. Some of them were literally like this, like in a professor's stance, like with,
I know, such an odd concept.
Norwegian audiences are so different. But see, here's the thing. Now, that was and I'm thinking, oh, God, we suck. These people, they're just not digging it. But afterwards, I couldn't leave for almost 2.5, 3 hours for all of the compliments, people that wanted to talk about the music. This was a crowd of, I don't want to say snobby, but of that echelon of Oslo musicians, and they were literally studying us. Because a couple of the guys in the band had gone to a couple of different high-profile music schools in Oslo and in Kristiansand, so they knew some of these people, and it was that type of crowd. I just didn't understand that. Yeah. But imagine that, you're like, y'all can dance if you want to, and then nobody dances.
I remember that. I mean, the first years when I was singing, because I was, playing so much, all through the continent, and the further south you went, the more. I mean, my music is very rhythmic, and I always played with percussionists. Yeah. So many people would dance in the back or sometimes in the front. And in Norway, they were so still You know, so I would sometimes say to my husband, "Oh, I would get more reaction if I was singing in a cemetery because they were so." They were so.
You hear the bones rattling. No, they are a different. They're a different kind of audience, and they interpret things so differently. I read a review. We went to see Prince at the Oslo Spectrum, which was probably the greatest concert experience I ever had. We were on the floor about from me to that spotlight there, about 6 feet away from the edge of the stage. Prince sweat on Snoopy. I've never loved her more. That's how close we were. But there was an interlude, not really a break, but just an interlude where he was playing piano and things got kind of quiet. And I heard people kind of off to the side, Norwegian people commenting how they thought it was arrogant or they thought it was bad showmanship of him to, who does he think he is? Why does he want the spotlight? Why is he just playing the piano? Why can't the band? And I'm like, who would say something like that but a Norwegian crowd? And it might sound like I'm talking bad about Norwegians. I guess I am. It's just different. It's a different. They perceive their music a little bit differently. It is a specialized.
Well, I can tell you a little story about that because I've lived here so long. I've learned to. It's a kind of humbleness.
Yeah.
It's also a shyness. I think Norwegians are also very shy.
Very much so.
And this whole sort of American way of selling ourselves is not so typical here.
It's a little too forward for them.
So I was teaching this very past winter in Costa Rica, and I was teaching a workshop, and then a colleague of the woman who hired me considered me to give a workshop like right away after, so I didn't have to travel away. And she was expecting me to sell myself, and because I'd been so long in Norway, I was a bit, I think I can do, and then she didn't want me. And then I spoke to the woman who hired me, and she said, yeah, but you didn't sell yourself. So then I got on the phone again, and I kind of pumped myself up, took on a persona, and oh, great. Oh, you're hired, So I had to be completely not that. And that's not just only Norway. That's also
I'm sure it's other places as well.
No, but it's Europe. That Europeans on the whole are not selling themselves like Americans.
But I think selling oneself in the way that we Americans do, I don't think that should be taken as arrogance. Now, a lot of people here do take that as arrogance. I look at it like this. If I don't love the work that I do, who is?
It's also true.
Who's going to and who's going to get the word out there for me?
But then, we have a whole other kind of society here that you get very taken care of. I mean, I see it with my husband's kids.
You're talking about the social network.
Yeah. No, I mean, they're often, you very easily can have sick leave. You easily have help from NAV, which has many good sides. Of course it does. I mean, my husband's kids, it's great.
That's one of the things I love about Norway. We don't have to worry about these things.
But on the other hand, growing up as I did in New York, where we're scraping and everything is about survival, we have to find these deeper roots, which I think is the good thing.
Yeah.
But maybe the bad thing is we have to every time sell ourselves.
Yes.
And prove that we can, prove that we can, prove that we can.
Well, again, who's going to advocate for us? We have to advocate for us. We have to take that upon. We've learned to take that upon ourselves. Are you from a middle class family?
Well, they became middle class, but when I was growing up, they were, I won't say dirt poor, but tight poor.
Okay.
I mean, just at the edge, lower middle class.
Can you say something about that process of actually becoming middle class?
My mother remarried.
That helps.
I mean,
marry up or across, not down, okay?
Basically, and then my father, my parents got divorced, and my father moved to upstate New York, and he just lived more inside his means.
Okay.
And, just was not, after my mom passed away, I spent some time with my dad, and he told that your mother was always living outside of our means. It drove us crazy. We were 4 kids in a short time, and I think being alive is expensive in every country, and America,
Well, especially in New York City.
Yeah,
Good
and
Lord.
you have to pay for everything. So I think they were. I remember
What
that.
kind of work did your parents do?
My mom was a teacher and my dad was an engineer, and it sounds like
An engineer. Yeah.
like here in Norway you get paid really well for those
Sure,
jobs, but
sure.
not in that time.
No.
So, for example, my parents would give us kids each $1 for a like spending money, and at the end of the week they would always ask for that $1 back because they had no money to buy food.
Wow.
Just to give a little idea.
That's hard times then. That's New York City hard times. Yeah.
It was pretty tight. That's why I say we were not like poor,
No.
but it was always very tight.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was hardly ever specials. I mean, I remember for our birthdays, we would go into Chinatown, which then, I mean, now I know, recently I was in the, shall we say, the real Chinatown, which is now in Queens, which I didn't know, but that time it was downtown Manhattan.
Yeah.
And go to one of those restaurants that was like a family of 4 could, and it was always some cousin that came along. Let's say we were like 7 or 8 people. I think the bill would be like $15.
Okay.
You know, everybody could eat for like $1,
Yeah.
you know, kind of thing.
Do those hard times as a child manifest in the work that you do?
What do you mean?
Well, when you have hard times, it can manifest itself in your general life in that, if you grew up with a tight economy, maybe you just don't like to spend too much money as an adult now.
Well,
So that's manifesting itself within one's life. But in the work that you do, maybe in your writing process, do you write about people's life struggles?
Sometimes, sure.
Could those hard times, and if there was a key person who helped you, or maybe there wasn't a key person who helped you when you needed it, does that manifest itself in your efforts at teaching and helping others?
Well, I'm always very generous. If somebody says they can't pay, I always give a sliding
That's
scale.
what
I do that.
Something like that.
And I have to say, because I grew up, let's call it without extras. So, for example, I wanted to get a guitar. So I had to start babysitting. And I think I was like 12 when I started babysitting.
Okay.
So I remember saving up 12, 13, 14, 15 to have enough money to buy a guitar.
Yeah.
But then it's the thing has really big value. So one thing let's call it I'm a little bit allergic against. Like one of the things I have a hard time here in Norway is how rich many people are, and in that richness, there's another kind of arrogance, like a kind of spoiled or almost too satisfied. And so, sometimes my childhood was a little bit hard, but when I look back, I think, it wasn't, again, we weren't on the street poor, which really, that must be terrible. But,
hard times
we
poor.
were tight. It was just, there was no extras.
Yeah.
I mean, for example, like the Christmas, I grew up Jewish, so we had Hanukkah, and I mean, we would get like socks, or silly putty.
Yeah,
I mean, and I remember going to school with all the Irish Catholics who would like have such amazing. They would have like a new bike and a winter jacket, and I was like, oh. So I mean, that kind of thing. So you could see that in that there wasn't any money for the extras, but we had food and. Speaking of the music, so what was really important, because both my parents grew up really poor, and especially my mom, who actually doesn't have any, God bless you, Mom. She loved music, but she wasn't any kind of natural musician.
No.
But she really wished she had music lessons herself. So I don't know how they did it, but they scraped together enough to pay for one piano teacher to teach 4 kids one time a week.
Okay.
And I remember we were little
Amazing.
runty kids, 4 of us. I was the oldest, and each of my brothers, we were like a year and a half apart. And this piano teacher, I don't know what she did, but we all love music.
Huh.
She did it. I mean, I've been a
4
piano
kids
teacher.
getting taught once a week. That's
I've had to teach 3, but I've never had to teach 4. 4 little kids.
interesting.
So that was very special.
I think poverty and hard times, and very often, in more ways than one, leaves a stamp on artists, whether you're a musician or I see this a lot in stand-up comedy. A lot of these guys and ladies have had some real trauma in their younger years, and it comes out in their comedy. But I think it also comes out in, maybe it's in the work ethic. One of my musical heroes is Sammy Hagar.
I don't know.
Oh, Deborah Jeanne. Okay, everybody, let it be known, Deborah Jeanne does not know who Sammy Hagar is. No, I get
Next
it.
time
I
I will know.
No, he started with the rock band Montrose in 1972. He went on to be the lead singer of Van Halen after David
that I
Lee Roth
heard.
left. Yeah, and now he's still performing, doing his thing. But he grew up very, very poor. In Northern California, in the San Francisco area. Very often they were homeless, living in a car. His mother would pick fruit with the migrants that came in from Mexico. So that was his childhood. And it manifests itself all throughout his music career in that he has been very giving in a lot of ways, but also financially. He's quite a wealthy man. He had his own tequila brand and a few other business ventures, and he gives so much of that money away. And it's very interesting to see how those younger years that were a little bit rough show up in the business life, in the music of some of these
Yeah, I mean,
musicians.
I luckily didn't have it that rough.
Yeah,
I always had a room to.
You weren't picking fruit with migrants, no.
No. I mean, in the little town I grew up in, Queens, there was no
There were
fruit
no-
trees
no.
to pick.
Not many orange trees in Queens.
I wouldn't mind, I mean, oh goodness, sometimes when I drive by the highway, when I see where we grew up, I mean, we played just by the highway. That was the only green patch in Laurelton.
Yeah.
And I mean, none of us got killed. I don't know. We just
Times were different. Times were different back then.
We
Now,
stopped before the highway.
most of my years were out in rural Ohio, but I was born in Akron, Ohio, right smack in the middle of the city. And we moved
It's
from
a
there.
very famous town. You know that.
Oh yeah, absolutely,
Because it's
The-
where the AA meeting got started.
exactly.
the
Yeah,
12-step
AA
meeting.
got started there. Yeah. So we moved from there when I was 7, and now I lost my thought. What was I going to say?
About Akron and not having fruit trees and having no green grass.
That's what it was. That transformation from the concrete urban life to going out where, we woke up almost every morning with a bunch of deer in the backyard and, and nature, and everything was green and woodlands and farm areas and all of that stuff. I always stop from time to time and wonder what that did to me to grow up that way instead of the other way, in the concrete jungle in a city that at that time, I think I was probably too young to know whether it was good or bad. But now that neighborhood is not, there's a lot of shootings and things like that. So our life is reflected in the work we do as artists.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Well, and speaking of this nature, one of the things when I first came here to live in Norway, even though Oslo, okay, it's a much bigger city now, but my husband, he loves to go canoeing.
Now, he's Norwegian, right?
No, he's from Netherlands.
He's from
I mean,
Netherlands,
he
okay.
has also a Norwegian passport,
Okay.
and he speaks beautiful Norwegian. When we first met, he had to learn English, so I became his English teacher, which is why our language is still English. So,
I see.
But anyway, so he loves the canoe, and he loves the nature around, in the fjord and all the beautiful islands. And we would go on these trips, and at the beginning, I was really kind of scared and bored, and
Yep.
the quiet, the nature.
I get
it's
it.
like a New York City kid. What the?
Yeah.
And we had some really bad fights because I just couldn't. I turned that anxiety into fighting with him.
Yeah. No, I
Because I
understand.
couldn't do
It's
the
different.
quiet.
Yeah.
But now I can.
Well,
Now I love the nature.
when I tell people about our place up on Silent, up in Finnmark, and I show them pictures, I post all the time on social media, and there's a herd of reindeer running across our property, and that's our closest neighbor. And people back home, or even people here in Norway that aren't from that part of Norway, they're like, "How can you? What is it about that you love? How could you live like that?" And I send right back to them, well, how can you live without it? So it's a matter of perspective. It's a matter of
And you have
what-
to learn it.
Well, you have to learn it, yeah. But luckily, and I say this all the time, moving up to Finnmark and Northern Troms and having our place up there, to me, that's more like coming home. Because to me, it's very comparable, and the way the people are up north are very comparable to what I was used to in my little small town rural area
that's great.
in Ohio. It's here in this city that I feel uncomfortable and squeezed. I mean, well, if I'm going to live in a city, I'm glad it's Drummond. And if I'm going to live in Drummond, I'm glad it's here. You saw how quiet this neighborhood
very
is. There's no
nice.
through traffic or anything. So, okay, I can handle that. But my heart is up there, up north. But it's a matter of perspective. It's a matter of lived experience. But I can easily see that, at least from my experience, from what I've seen, it's more difficult for a city person to acclimatize oneself to the country than it is for a country person to get used to living in the city.
Well, I have to take your word for it because I'll
think
never
so.
know.
Well, I think so. I've seen more friends in marriages or in relationships argue where it is the city person who says things like, living in the country is boring. There's nothing to do here. It's too quiet. Whereas a country person can find ways to get used to the city more often and easier than that city person can find a way to get used to the country, I think.
I mean, one of the things because of this musical I mentioned, I was lucky. I had a grant here in Oslo, so we did a very extensive stage reading, and it was well received. And then I went to New York in November. I was staying with some friends, and being in New York City now, the level of noise is phenomenal. It's like scary how loud everything is.
That would drive me nuts. I don't think I could
and
handle
I'm
it.
not used to it, and it sort of upset me that, I left New York already. I left at the beginning of the 80s, so I haven't been there for the last 45 years of noise development. But people should complain or say, but you get used to it, and that's not a good thing to get used to. So I'm very happy. That's one thing I am very happy about living in Norway, that I learned quiet.
Well, it is a medical fact that all of that noise does something to you, and not just physically, but it will do something to your whole mental, emotional process, having all that noise.
I mean, for your cells, just back to my Alexander technique, that is a kind of traumatizing the system.
Well, it stamps a permanent anxiety on you, and the sad thing is that you're not even aware of it.
No, but you're not breathing as much. Your cells are closed in.
Exactly.
And it affects your voice.
Absolutely, yeah. And I don't need things to pull my voice down. If that was one thing about myself that I can improve, I wish I had a voice that had more endurance. But maybe that's because I don't perform live nearly as much as I used to. I find that after a 20-minute stand-up comedy set, I'm tired in my throat. Yeah. That's not good.
Well, maybe we have another conversation, and I do some Alexander with you. We'll see. Who knows? Yeah.
Well, speaking of another conversation, you have an open invitation here. Now, we've been talking for an hour and 5 minutes. Can you believe that?
So we need to come to an end.
We need to take a pause because, like I say, you're going to come back again. I hope. I'm going to definitely have an open door for you.
My novel, The Sinking of the Leonardo da Vinci, I just signed the contract a few days ago, and it's coming out in June.
Now, we're talking through a Norwegian publisher or an American?
It's going to be, right now, that was the American publisher, but on Monday I meet with a Norwegian publisher that I can try to get it out in Norway also at the same time.
See, now you're living the life to which I aspire. I am an author. I am self-publishing an ongoing audiobook. Yeah, I read. I will write. I write a chapter. It's pretty cool.
I have a lot I can learn from you, Mr. John Allen.
Well, let's back up. Let me talk about my audiobook a little bit. This is to put it out there, but also as a conversation piece for us. For the longest time, Snoopy, my wife, was telling me that I should do an audio, or that I should write a book, a memoir of sorts. She's been pushing me to do that for years.
Just about living in the North, I think, would be fascinating.
well, she's been pushing me to do that for years, okay? And I'm like, yeah, and I've actually tried to start writing that book, and I've always stopped for a lot of reasons. That whole thing of not feeling authentic or not feeling qualified.
It's very easy to stop.
Yes. So I got to thinking, because I really wanted to write that book. So I got to thinking, how can I do this? How can I make it so that I don't stop? And what I came up with is this. Because she also kept telling me that I need to use my voice more, whether it's doing voiceovers or doing more podcasts. I had a radio show at one point. So I thought, well, she and a few other people, they tell me they like my voice. They want me to use it more. How about if I just do an audiobook? But then I started thinking, well, I'm probably going to end up stopping like I always do. That imposter syndrome will kick in. So I started thinking, okay, an audiobook is better than writing a physical book. I don't have to worry so much about all of that post-production to actually get it printed and all that stuff. But how do I make it so that I don't stop? And I came up with this. A monthly, actually it's a weekly subscription. People who want to hear my audiobook, they pay $5 a month. $5 a month. And I send them through the email list one chapter per week.
Do you have people?
Yeah, I do.
I have another conversation. I want to learn that. That's great.
So it solved the two problems. One, it got my book out there immediately. Right. I didn't need a publisher. I could do it myself. And two, it made it so that I cannot stop because I have subscribers who are waiting. Good. They're paying me $5, so I have to keep going. And now, having said that, I have taken a planned 6-month break from that book because I needed to take care of a couple other projects, but I'm going to come back to it. And it will be one chapter a week for $5 a month, and I'll just continue. I think I have put out 14 chapters so far of this, and it's solved that whole imposter syndrome problem. I don't have time to think about whether it's good enough because Deborah, I literally will write a chapter, and as soon as it's written, I go on that microphone over there on the other end of my studio here, and I read that chapter in.
So you can do an audiobook here.
I do an audiobook here. That is exactly.
But couldn't you do another? I mean, if I wanted,
absolutely.
Because it's another consideration how I'm going to put out the audiobooks.
I would love to work with you on that. You can do it right here. And I read in that chapter, and the editing process happens as I read. If I see, I could have said that a little bit better or I misspelled, I just hit pause and I go to my tablet where I've written it and I fix it and then start the record up again and then read it. And it knocks out that editing process. It knocks out that anxiety about finding a publisher. It gets my audiobook directly to the audience.
Bravo.
So that's my solution. And again, I don't have time for imposter syndrome because people are waiting. And I'm not spending all that time evaluating what I have written. I literally write it, and immediately when that chapter is done, go on that microphone and read it in.
Great. I last summer
it's working.
I was at a writing workshop with one of my absolute favorite writers from Ireland, and he said the way he writes is that he literally talks it to himself as he's typing it.
I see.
So you're talking your book out, which is great.
Yeah, and I got surprised very quickly because I say a memoir of sorts, and I started with that summer, as I remember it, when we moved from Akron and out to the country. That's where I started. And I thought it would just be a very not so detailed summary of some observations that I've had up through the years. But it has turned out to where, like I say, I've written and read in on the audiobook, I think 14 chapters, and I'm only up to the age of 10 or 11. So at some point I will round off this book, and then I'll do that whole printing process and get a physical book.
Yeah, and then when you want to try to get an agent, I never was able to get an agent, but you can.
How's that?
Well, you're going to think I'm a racist.
Say it. No.
Well, it's very interesting that you're a Black American who lived in the north of Norway. That's absolutely unusual.
That is what
That'll get you a contract. I wish I was a Black American who lived in the north of Norway.
I'll tell you this, there's nothing racist about that. And as I have at times tried to downplay my Blackness, not deny it. I'm very Black
Don't
American.
down it now.
But I've tried to. My wife and a few other people said, no, that is the story.
This is the time.
But you know where it comes in, where it has been very beneficial. I mentioned earlier, I've made some appearances on television here in Norway, quite a few actually, and they want to hear from that Black American guy, former police officer, podcaster, politically and socially engaged
lives in
guy,
the north of Norway, who likes it in the north of Norway.
So that's part of, I have embraced that part of my life and made that part of my story. Thanks.
I'll be your agent. We'll get a lot of money.
Well, my goal is, like I say, I'm going to round off. I think I'm going to do maybe 4 more chapters. It'll be about an 18 to 20 chapter first volume of this memoir. And then I've got, the way it looks, there's going to be 2 more volumes. But when this one is rounded off, then I think I'll talk to you and get some suggestions about finding an agent and actually getting this thing printed.
Right, and now I think we are coming to the end, huh? Because I think I have a train to soon catch.
Yeah. Now let me ask you just 2 quick things.
Sure.
2 quick things. I like to do this for all of my guests.
Sure.
I always ask them to do 2 things for me. First, I'm going to say 3 words, and I want you to finish the sentence so that it's just one single sentence. Okay, here we go. Deborah Jeanne is
very happy to be here.
God bless you. Thank you. I'm so happy to have you here. That was right to the point and rather unexpected. A lot of people try to come with some sort of philosophical, but no, thank you for saying that. I've enjoyed this. The second thing I'd like to ask of you is, you have led quite an interesting life. Like I said, I invited you because I think I'm definitely interested in you. I thought that you could inspire me and motivate you, and you have done both of those things. But I also think that as my guest here, you can also do those things for the people who are watching and listening. Could you look into that camera, if you would, and say something to possibly encourage that struggling artist or that struggling human being out there? What can you say that could possibly help them through this struggle, to a greater or lesser degree, a struggle of this thing that we call life? What could you say to inspire or motivate?
Well, in my darkest moments, even if it's raining, I walk. I walk. I try to make some sound, even if it's gibberish. Even if it feels like it's all over, I'll never get famous, my life is finished. I make some, and there's something about that when it just starts moving, it just brings some fresh blood and fresh oxygen. And and many, many times I have this imposter syndrome and don't want to do the task at hand. And and it's really like, for example, if you want to write, it's sometimes we have to like buckle ourselves into the chair and be willing to just not do it well and to know we can revise. So I love this expression, lower your standards, then revise.
Ah, beautiful.
So maybe I end there.
I love it. Excellent. Excellent words of wisdom.
Walk, lower our standards, because I'm a recovered perfectionist, and that never serves.
Walking brings reality to light. It is medicine for the soul, for the heart, soul, and mind.
And making sounds.
And for making sound,
Little babies do it, little infants.
Yeah.
It's really good for us.
I love it. Everybody, this is Deborah Jeanne Weitzman. She has been my guest today. I have enjoyed it. I hope you have too. I know you have. I don't even have to wonder. You've enjoyed this as well.
I hope so.
I hope so too. But this is the whole thing of my show. I like to do this first and foremost for myself. And my hope is that those of you out there watching and listening enjoy it as well. You guys can go to DeborahJeanne.com. You'll see the spelling.
DeborahJeanne.
There you go. And you'll also see the spelling of that in the description. Right. And there'll be a hyperlink where you can click right into it.
And I am available for even online coaching and Alexander and helping people find their creative river.
When you guys see her website, you will see ways to contact her if you would like that type of teaching, coaching, performance. Check her out. She's quite the talented soul. I'm so glad. This is a quick turnaround. I think it's been 3 days we talked, and now here you are.
I never knew that you even existed.
And here we are. You know what? Things happen.
Yeah.
Things happen, and here we are. This is the beginning of a new friendship. So,
I hope so.
Thank you so much, Deborah.
Thank you.
Thank you all for watching and listening. Remember, there's a lot of beauty out there in the world. Go out there, love and be loved, and enjoy the process. This is Coming Home with John Allen. Bye now.
Bye-bye.